what I had also observed from other Shi'is who were involved in kind of debates and this kind of argumentation with Sunnis is that they often reference Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. They were often referencing these Sunni hadith collections. And I thought, well, okay, they are referencing these books, so that must be important. But what about the Shi'i analog to these books? What's really our Sahih Bukhari? What's our Sahih Muslim? And that was what made me search for that. And I came to the work called Al-Kafi. Al-Kafi.
I can see where this is going.
ورد في الكافي الشريف للشيخ الكليني الجزء الاول صفحه 448 طبعه الخامسه طبعه دار الكتب الاسلاميه عن ابي عبد الله عليه السلام قال لما ولد النبي صلى الله عليه واله مكث اياما ليس له لبن فالقاه ابو طالب على ثدي نفسه فانزل الله فيه لبنا فرضع منه اياما حتى وقع ابو طالب على حليمه السعديه فدفعه اليها. عنوان حلقتي لهذا اليوم: الاكراد قوم من الجن فلا يجوز التعامل والتزاوج منهم كما في الكافي الشريف. عنوان حلقتي لهذا اليوم: النظر الى عوره غير المسلم جائز لانه كالنظر الى عوره الحمار ولا شيء عليك. قال سالته عن الارض مو عن الحوت على اي شيء هي؟ فايش قال الامام؟ قال هي على حوت.
Al-Kafi is this huge collection of statements from the Imams, mainly. That's the bulk of it, but also hadith. They claim to be hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I started looking through this, and I was shocked. You know, I was absolutely shocked at the kinds of narrations that I was reading in Al-Kafi. And you know, there were some narrations about the Imams like having this knowledge of the ghaib and knowing the ghaib, basically having this kind of supernatural knowledge.
المعصوم ما تخفى عليه خافية في الوجود لأنه ليس هو مثلنا وليس مثلنا. احنا الآن إذا واحد يحكي معك اثنين ثلاثة يكون معك الدوخ ما تركز. الإمام يسمع كل لغات العالم في نفس اللحظة ويسمع تسبيح الملائكة في العرش وتسبيح النمل في الأرض في لحظة واحدة. الإمام غير شيء حبيبي، شيء آخر مختلف.
الأئمة يعلمون الغيب ويعلمون ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما في الأكوان.
That didn't really ring, or that didn't light any alarms, basically, for me. Not because I had that exact belief before, but I just, you know, that would be consistent with what I had been raised to understand of Islam. But what really shocked me and made me actually start this whole doubt, and I mean, it was almost conclusive, but it wasn't exactly there at that time, or I didn't realize it at that time. But the narrations about revelation continuing, and that Jibreel alayhi salam was continuing to bring revelation after the passing away of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
یک روایت که در کافی شریف است و با سند معتبر نقل شده است. و اون روایت این است که حضرت صادق سلام الله علیه می‌فرماید فاطمه سلام الله علیها بعد از پدرش 75 روز زنده بودند، در این دنیا بودند و حزن و شدت ایشون غلبه داشت. و جبریل امین می‌آمد خدمت ایشون و ایشون تعزیت عرض می‌کرد و مسائلی از آینده نقل می‌کرد. ظاهر روایت این است که در این 75 روز مراوده این دست، یعنی رفع جبریل زیاد بوده است. و گمان ندارم که غیر از طبقه اول از انبیاء اعظام درباره کسی اینطور واضح باشد که در ظرف 75 روز جبریل امین رفع آمد داشته است و مسائل را در آتیه که واقع شده است مسائل را ذکر کرده است و اون چیزی که به ذریه می‌رسید است در آتیه ذکر کرده است و حضرت امین هم اونها را نوشته است. کاتب وحی دست حضرت
اهل البيت بين بصريح العبارات في احاديث مستفيضه عندها انه يوحى اليهم
ان الله تعالى اوحى يا فاطمه لان هذا المصحف بوحي الله تعالى عبر جبرائيل الى فاطمه.
So this just blew my mind, and narrations about how you know, the revelation that has come to Fatima radiallahu anha and the Imams later was actually far more than the Quran. So that was completely like contradicting what I had known and understood of Islam growing up. And you have these kinds of narrations. So at first I was like, okay, so and these kinds of things are not found in Bukhari or Muslim, these types of narrations. So I started asking around, like, well, what's the deal? Like, how do we make sense of this stuff? And I mean, there was more than just those things I found weird and off-putting, but this revelation, or that Jibreel alayhi salam was continuing to bring teaching of Islam after the passing away of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that was really the main thing. It wasn't the only thing. And then what happened was I had asked others, and they said, I don't know. These are like fabrications. These are fabrications. So I thought, how can this? I started the whole process of reading Al-Kafi on the basis that this is an analog to what Sunnis have in Bukhari and Muslim. This is the analog, and what characterizes Bukhari and Muslim is that they are sahih, that they are authentic, and it's been authenticated, and they have this whole authentication process that I didn't really know, but I understood the concept of sahih. And then you're telling me
you want to authenticate all the narrations in Al-Kafi. Just the chapter headings are shocking enough. These were created by Kulaini, so these are his beliefs, and the narrations he puts underneath those headings are, what backs up his beliefs. And those things are shocking in itself for any monotheist. Stuff like the Imams have knowledge of all that was given to the angels and the prophets, right? The Imams know when they will die, and they will only die by their choice. The Imams have knowledge of the past and the future, and nothing is hidden from them. And it goes on and on and on. And then you come across narrations such as, the Imams know every drop of, every leaf that drops off a tree and touches the floor, every drop of rain that hits the sea. I mean, for any monotheist looking at this stuff, it's like, what is this? Did you feel that? Or was that, pretty normal to you?
No, those things were surprising to me as well. But I chalk that up to, like, maybe I just don't know, like, the extent of the Imam's power. Like, it's strange. Like, this is stuff that is supposed to be reserved for Allah, knowledge that only Allah has of the ghaib. So it's strange, but that wasn't the main thing for me personally that got me to, like, that. Because, like, certain things you just are maybe desensitized to, like extremism when it comes to describing the Imams, like the concept of being ma'soom, like they're sinless. I already had that and had been raised with that. So that was within, like, the plausibility structure that I already had as a Shi'i. But this stuff about continuous revelation or continuing revelation, that was completely outside of what so I was not desensitized to that because I hadn't even heard about that. I hadn't even heard about it, and my dad and my parents had no idea about it. So anyway, I asked others, and at one point I even got a chance to ask Naqshbandi, who you might know as a pretty popular teacher or preacher of Shi'ism. And he was visiting the United States at one point, and I went just for the purpose of asking him about Al-Kafi. And in the Q&A, basically, of his talk, I asked, is Al-Kafi the most authentic collection of hadith that we have? And his answer was, yes, of course. This is and he went on to describe it and praise it. And then I said, well, what about this narration? And what about this narration? Like, how do we really understand this? And his response was that, oh, those are fabrications. So immediately, like he said, these are fabrications. So this was very unsatisfying or dissatisfying, that how can you have a book that you consider the most authentic, but it has all these fabrications in it? Fabrications are lies. They're lies. It's not like they're da'if. And I remember he said fabrication. He said these are fabricated. So there's, like, what happened was this is epistemological issue, right? Because if you can't trust your most authentic source, then what can you trust? What can you have any confidence in? Just for yourself. Forget about, like, debating Sunnis. Forget about arguing with Sunnis. Like, you have no ground to stand on. because your most authentic book is full of fabrications, major fabrications that are actually, they're not like fabrications about like some small issues, and they're not even fabrications about the rightful position of Ali radiallahu anhu as being the successor of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are fabrications about the nature of revelation. These are fabrications about the nature of Allah sending the Quran, sending revelation to humanity. So this is like Islam that you're fabricating about. So this, like, as I'm thinking about this, and it took some time, like, to put the pieces together, and it was all internal reflection. As I mentioned, Sunnis I wasn't actively debating with Sunnis. I wasn't actively, like, they weren't telling me these arguments. These are things that I was just reflecting on. And then the other thing that I had heard growing up as a Sunni is the justification, the logical justification for why you have to have imams and these 12 imams. You have to have imams, it was argued, because how can you really understand the Quran? Like, how can you as a person understand the Quran when you have limited intellect and you have limited knowledge? You have to have someone who has perfect knowledge, or at least is sinless, is masum. You have to be in a sinless state to correctly interpret the Quran and the statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then that's why there has to be a succession of imams. And then the 12th imam is in occultation. He's in hiding. And that's how we can guarantee that our teachings are sound and are correct, because the masum imam at any given time guarantees that. Okay, so this is like a epistemological point, okay, about how we can be confident in what we're following is true. And I was very concerned about that. I was very concerned.
So he's meant to be guiding, but at the same time he's not guiding.
Who's not?
The 12th imam. So he's meant to be guiding, but at the same time,
well, yeah. So this is the problem that I came upon. That, okay, well, there isn't an imam here right now with me, or that's a parent who is going to interpret revelation for me right now and tell me, like, what I can and can't do. I have to rely on his representative. Okay. So who is his representative? There are different claimants to be representing the Imam Zaman, the final imam, and they disagree with each other. And then I'm being conveyed.
Some of them even make takfir of each other.
Yeah, they're having big disputes. And then I'm getting this knowledge, supposed knowledge, from someone who is not masum, right? So there's going to be a non-masum link, right, between me and what's the authentic knowledge. So if the non-masum link is there at, like, the very end of the chain, right, think about it logically, at the very end of the chain before it gets to me, because there's a representative of the final imam who is hiding, that's I'm getting it at the end of the chain. That person is not masum. Well, then it could have been at the beginning of the chain, right? The beginning of the chain with the first narrator of the hadith in Sahih Bukhari or Sahih Muslim. He could have also been not masum, which is what Sunnis claim. They don't claim that the narrators are masum, right? So that, was a kind of logical realization. Like, if you put it together, it doesn't really make sense. This whole idea of imams as guaranteeing that what you are learning is correct, or what it is true and true guidance. So that was a big shock, but it went hand in hand. Like, it makes sense. Like, if your understanding of revelation depends on these 12 imams being masum and they're coming with true knowledge that you're getting, if you rely on that, then it makes sense that your hadith sciences are going to be very weak and are going to be even filled with fabrications and fraudulence. Why? Because you're depending on another concept. You're depending on this concept of the imams having some kind of spiritual protection from error and the secret 12th imam, blah, blah, blah. So then you're not going to focus so much attention on making sure that what you're relaying textually or through narration is sound and is authentic and is, we can be very sure that this is a solid chain of transmission. And I realized that, well, obviously the Sunnis are going to have much stronger tradition, and that turned out to be the case when I later started studying more and more, and at that point I'd become Sunni because I couldn't, square the circle of these contradictions that I had come across in my studies of Shi'i texts.
So what was it about Ahl Sunnah that attracted you to it? Was it simply that you just felt like the sources were more reliable? Was it this appeal of pure monotheism?
With Ahl Sunnah, it started with just the epistemological point that I mentioned. Like, you want to start on solid ground. You want to start knowing that the knowledge that you're getting is authentic. Yeah, so what was attractive at first, like initially, was just the fact that you have this strong epistemological grounding for your beliefs, and you can make this very plausible claim that what you are teaching is what the Prophet ﷺ taught. That was really what was most attractive, and you can back it up with this entire massive tradition of hadith transmission and isnad and so forth. So that was really what was attractive. And I think many people, even when you hear converts to Islam, where they're coming from Christianity or Judaism, this is one of the main things that attracts people to Islam in the first place, is that we feel like our books have been corrupted. We feel like our what the preacher is teaching and what the rabbi is teaching or whoever, this is not actually what God has said. This is not God's message. It's been corrupted. And in Islam, we saw this authenticity, and we saw this kind of epistemological preservation of God's message, and it's being practiced and it's being lived. And that's what's really attracting us to Islam. And so that was the same thing for me, but in a kind of Islamic context.
So you've been Sunni for how many years now?
How many years? Like 16 or 17 years.
So now when you look at 12 Shi'ism, do you view it in the same light that you used to when you were a Shia?
No, I mean, I've come to learn more and more how so many of the practices within Shi'ism don't reflect, the way that the Prophet ﷺ lived his life. And some of them are practices for 12 Shi'is, others are practices for other sects, Ismailis, for example, Al-Khanis, Zaydis. You find these kinds of variances, but specifically within 12 Shi'is, there are these kinds of practices that I don't see the Prophet ﷺ teaching this or doing this in his own lifetime. And if you have already gotten away from this concept of imams that are continuing adapting and continuing to teach new things in the religion, then it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that why would you be practicing it today when the Prophet ﷺ had nothing to do with that?